All right, guys, we're ready to get the ESC and the motor mounted. Get them situated on here, figure out exactly how we want them. I took out the two screws right here in the front that hold the front of the battery tray. That way you can slip the ESC in and out really easily. And then I'm going to pull these 6 screws here and get this competition motor mount off of here. So generally what I like to do is just use a pair of pliers to get these loose up here. Right? And then once they're loose, you can just, it's just these two up front. And you don't actually have to take them out. You just have to loosen them, and then this will slip right out. It pulls right off of there. Thing I do like about my 700 tri-blade and then this competition is you have an extra bearing support for your motor shaft, which is kind of nice. All right, let's see how the motor mounts up. All right, guys, we got the motor mount here. So the way that it looks like this works is we will mount the motor like so, and you actually do have to take this piece off because otherwise you cannot get the pinion on. And then we will put the pinion on like that, and then we will get this mounted on here like so, and then that should be good to go. All right, so we got the motor in. It was a huge pain in the ass, kind of. So these belts have 0 flex, which I get it. You know, you don't want any flex in the belt. But you also have, you know, this extra thing with an extra bearing support. You have to get your pinion on there on the shaft in the exact right spot, you know. But in the end, I just had to use a flathead screwdriver and pry the belt until it slipped over the pulley. So you assemble the motor mount, the motor, you put the pinion on, and you put this pulley or this pinion support on there, right? You put it all together, and then you slide it in here, and then you just have to do whatever it takes to get that belt over top of the pinion. And the pinion has a little bit of an, you know, a ridge on it as well. But now, if we pull it tight and we spin it, you can actually see that the belt is about as centered as I'm ever going to get it, because I can't push the pinion up any higher. But we can actually see gear on the bottom and top of it, so I'm good with that. It's not dead center, but it's plenty. We got plenty of contact. So we'll go ahead and get this tightened down then. It's just these 2 bolts up top, one here, and then the same on the other side, and then you got one here on each side. So the way that I do belt tension on these is the same way that I do the belt tension on the rear of the heli. I just grab the mount and I pull it as hard as I can, and then I just put one screw in and fully tighten it, and then I tighten all of them. And it makes for a very nice belt tension. You still have, you know, just a slight amount of give, but the belt is not going anywhere. All right, we'll go ahead and do a mock-up of the ESC and put it in here and see what exactly that we're going to be looking at. What's all going to fit where. Again, if you pull these 2 screws out in the front, this battery tray will actually lift up enough that you can slip this in there. So we just pushed it in a little bit more and got it locked in. I do like the SAB gives you this nice little rubber grommet right here to kind of help protect your wires. But we'll see if we can get 3 8-gauge wires through there. We may not be able to. Okay, I was not able to use the rubber grommet. No big deal. I don't run those on any of my other helis anyway. But the ESC's in mounted. We got everything plugged in. Got the beefy ass 8-gauge wires here coming up to the motor. I'm going to go ahead and put a zip tie on here and get this secured. All right, I went ahead and lifted this thing up really far, put double-sided tape to hold the ESC, put this thing back on, and put all of its bolts back in. So the ESC is now mounted. All right, motor's plugged in. I decided not to zip tie it yet because we don't know if we need to reverse one of these. Now we can actually start mounting the servos. So we'll take our JX and we will put one right here. So they go towards the inside with the spline. And then one will go right there. And then in the back, one will actually go right like that. So we have the mounting hardware right here for the servos. All right, you have these little carbon fiber pieces that go on each side of the servo, and then screws. I went ahead and pulled the 3 screws from the plate that holds your flight controller because we're going to start mounting the servos now, and we're going to need to run all the leads into here and zip tie them down, and then we'll put the flight controller on top of it and hide it all. Now, if you remember, we centered all of our servos, so we just want to slip that horn on there at a perfect right angle, and then we'll be close enough that we can do sub trims and fix anything that needs leveled. All right, so we've only just set them in there, right? We haven't put any screws in the backside of them yet because we want to get them arranged how we like them, and then we actually just want to pull it up and turn it like that, and then put the screw in the servo horn. And don't forget to use Loctite on these guys. Just get some Loctite on there like that. All right, so the servos are almost finished being installed. We're just going to toss in a couple of more screws here. These particular 2 right here on this servo, because the motor is here, you have to do the entire thing 2 whole screws with a hex key, which actually didn't take as long as I remembered it taking, but it was unpleasant nonetheless. All right, last servo. All right, we went ahead and put the servo horn on, and then we popped the push rod onto the ball joint. We got some Loctite on our servo screw here. Perfect, good to go. So here's our wire coming from the ESC. We actually are going to need an extension for that. All right, so we got our lead coming off of the ESC coming through here. The servo extension is actually connected right there, and then it's held together as an extra precaution with double-sided tape. And then it actually runs down the same path as our RX power wire, which goes straight down here. I haven't tightened these zip ties yet. And it goes right through there, which is a small spot, basically right in there where the tail boom slopes, but the frame doesn't. So you always have these open slots to run wires through. And then we have our satellites mounted. So we have one back here horizontally, and then we have one right here vertically. All right, so this thing is getting a 2S Gen Zeiss receiver pack. It's a 2200 milliamp. So, you know, our servos will pretty much always be sitting at 7.4 to 8.4 volts. It actually mounts right here. And then I made a power line that runs up to the flight controller. And that'll give us our power. And then let's flip this over. Well, she's finally on her feet and looking good. We have a mock-up of where all the wires are going to go. This is going to come down to this satellite. We have one that's coming from the Spirit device and going to this satellite. And we'll get those tied down. We'll probably go ahead and run this one through here. All right. And then we have the Spirit device in place. It's not mounted yet. And then we'll figure out which servo goes into what channel and then go from there. All right, so we got everything plugged in, and just for the rundown, this is channel 1, your front left. Channel 2 is actually your rear. And channel 3 is your front right. So it goes channel 1, channel 3, and then the rear is channel 2 on a Goblin. And that's how we got them all plugged in back here on the Spirit device. And then channel 4 obviously is the rudder, and then auxiliary 1 is our ESC, and auxiliary 2 is actually our power because it's an opto ESC, and we're running a receiver pack. So let's go ahead and just button up this last little bit of wiring, and then we'll go ahead and power it on just with the receiver, and then eventually we'll power it on with the motor and everything. All right, so she is completely built. We have the Spirit device completely mounted. We have all the wiring taken care of. We got the satellite and the back taken care of. Got the satellite on the side, horizontal, and then our vertical. All right. The only thing we have left to do is put a zip tie on the motor leads. The only reason that I'm not is because I'm not sure yet if the motor is going in the right direction. So we will wait on that. But it's bound already, has been, obviously. We can go ahead and plug in our RX pack and just let the Spirit initialize. We don't need the motor and ESC to do this. All right, we got our little bump. And that servo is set completely wrong. All right, so we need to dismount the horns on some of these, and then we need to go into the software and reinitialize because these are too far out of whack.